For those of us who are doing it, my advice to people is don't do it unless it's burning to get out. But if it is, then you should go do it.
Yeah.
And I've had several people who I've seen that it's burning to get out. My view is they should be running their own company.
Welcome to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle, with your host, Rob Schultz. Rob is the founder and president of Schultz Wealth. All opinions expressed by Rob and his guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Schultz Wealth Limited. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Please refer to our website for more information.
Welcome everybody to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle. I'm your host, Rob Schultz, and today I have a really good friend of mine. We've played golf a few times and over the years and had some very enjoyable times. And lo and behold, Mr. Peter Bendor-Samuel is a very successful entrepreneur. Started in '91 with his company, Everest Group, and has grown it into really a multinational success. And Peter, I've been trying to get you on the show for a while, and I finally have you here. I'm so excited because the things that we're going to talk about today are so crucial, I think, for entrepreneurs to understand that there can be ceilings that we can hit, and there's ceilings that other people like you are able to push through, and it ain't easy. So thank you for being on the show today.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. So Peter, you're not from around here?
I'm not.
Yeah. Tell us kind of your where you grew up and how you ended up in North Texas.
Wow. Well, so my parents were missionaries in Brazil.
Yeah.
And I was born in Brazil, born in Rio de Janeiro. For those Brazilians, that's a carioca. We were there on and off for the first 9 years of my life. My parents were with an indigenous group in the Amazon basin. So, to some degree, grew up in a mud hut in the Amazon. And then we moved permanently back to the UK when I was 9. I went to English boarding school between 11 and 16. Changed schools at 16, and then my parents were moved to the US, Dallas, Texas. Wycliffe Bible Translators has the headquarters just outside, actually in Dallas, outside of Duncanville. And we lived in Duncanville, and so I finished my senior year of high school in the US, and then went to Baylor. Actually went to Mountain View Junior College for the first semester, and then went to Baylor and got a couple of degrees from Baylor. At that point, so we'd been in Dallas. I ended up marrying a young lady from Denton, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas.
Yeah.
And she, remember when we were going to start the firm, we could have moved anywhere. And she said, "No, honey, you can live anywhere in the world you want to live. I'm going to live in Dallas." So I live in Dallas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is an intriguing, very unique background for sure. Obviously spending time in Brazil as a missionary family, then in the UK, and then here. Those are three very distinctly different environments for sure. I would suspect that having a background like that has kind of given you a little bit of an advantage with regard to being able to be the success that you've been. What of that background do you think really has kind of set you up and set you apart as kind of the unique person that you are?
I would say the most defining part of my personality, I have dyslexia.
Okay.
And so when I was a boy growing up, in England and in Brazil, we didn't know what dyslexia was.
Right.
But at least my form of dyslexia is more closer to dysgraphia. So get things jumbled up. But it's that overcoming or working with dyslexia. There is no answer to that. You are just not going to spell well. But so you have to find ways through and around the issue. And I think that creates a level of, and I think in many dyslexics, my experience with them and studying them, they kind of fall into two parts. Some give up and some push through. Those that push through tend to be very, very successful.
Agreed.
And those that give up
Yeah.
aren't. Um, often, and I was in the group that pushed through. I would think that would be more defining around how, when you're going to start a business, I think we were talking earlier. My view of that is, you've kind of got an angel and a devil on either shoulder, right? And at one level, you're relentlessly optimistic. You have a vision. You believe in yourself. You believe in that vision. On the other side, you're um, uh, brutally cynical and objective.
Sure.
You have to be able to make hard decisions. And anyway, that is sort of the yin and the yang. But anyway, so I'd go back to that. That's probably the most formative part of that prepared me or didn't prepare me or affected who I am.
Yeah. No, I can see that. And I would think that just because we talk about transition a lot on this show, that you have to change as a business owner over time. And that going from the jungles of Brazil to the UK to North Texas, those are big cultural changes, and that you maybe kind of learned how to maybe almost like.
Maybe maybe it's a mindset.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure that change it. Perhaps,
Yeah.
but I think it's more of a mindset and a self-confidence that allows you to change.
I like that. That's good. So Baylor, and then you had an executive career after that. We were talking. You went to work for EDS, I believe, here. And
yeah, I got an MBA. I got an undergraduate, then MBA at Baylor. I was recruited by EDS. Somewhat humorous story there. EDS had been somehow identified me to go to work for them, and they had their recruiter call me. I don't remember, but it felt like a lot. It was a lot at times, and I had not been interested in joining. And eventually, kind of broke down and said it was a free trip back to Dallas to see my parents because EDS headquarters were in Dallas. I'm like, okay, they'll pay for the gas to go back, and I can go see my family. And so I walk into the interview room, and the guy who'd been recruiting me, you sit down, nice to meet you, sit down. And his first question was, well, what makes you think you're EDS material? And I looked at him, I said, I have no idea, but apparently you do, because you've been hounding me to come here.
Yeah.
Anyway, he kind of looked at me in horror and then started laughing. We got on pretty well after that. But anyway, I'm sorry, I got distracted. But
no, it's just so you kind of grew up in the technology. This is early. When is this? This is early 90s, or?
Yeah, I graduated from Baylor with MBA in 82.
Yes, this is the 80s. This is technology software. This is like the great frontier, in essence. And so you're working, on a large company. I think later you talked about you went with EY a little bit on the consulting side, and you're in this. So you're in this kind of,
I did well at ADS, and I did well at EY, and they were offering me a partnership at EY when I left.
Yeah. What made you leave?
Well, quite frankly, I'd always thought that I was going to go back onto the mission field or third world development. And God shut that door a number of times. And I came to the conclusion that, that's not what God had in store for me. So, having tried to do it several times. So, I was like, well, I might as well go. I clearly meant to be in business. I might as well have fun. I was at EY, and I met a guy who had been a Boris Greenmont. Boris was a South African Jew who had left during apartheid and had a business in South Africa, left the business. So we were both senior managers at E&Y at the time, and we would talk about his experience starting a company, and it just seemed like a lot of fun. It seemed like really hard, but a lot of fun. And so I got this idea, and I'd come home to my wife in the evenings, and we'd discuss different ideas to start a company. And she would shoot them down. They, in retrospect, she's probably correct to do so.
Yeah.
And
It's a good role to have, actually.
I kind of felt like I had if it didn't work out, I could get another job. I was doing well, so I'd give it a shot. And I came home with the idea for Everest, and to my surprise, I was on a trip from coming back from New Orleans, and back then we had a legal pad, right? It was longer than the normal pads, and I had my business plan handwritten out on a legal pad, and kind of showed it to her. She said, "I think you should do it," and I was like, well, after I got off the floor, I said, "Okay, let's do it." So turns out later she had decided that clearly I was going to start a company at some point. She wanted to do it while I was young, so when we went bankrupt, we could have time to recover. But that's
so she just got to the point there. Whatever you showed her, she's whatever.
To her credit, she said, "Well, you know something about this area, so she's like, well, I think we have a better shot at something you know something about."
Yeah, so that's the start of Everest Group. And as we've talked about before, there's been several iterations of your company as you've grown and evolved over time. This started out as pretty much a software company, correct?
Well, the niche I identified at E&Y, and this was in '91, the practice I'd been running at E&Y was really negotiating or assessing whether people should do large outsourcing transactions. And the outsourcing wave was just starting, and no one understood it. And because I'd been at EDS, who was one of the first firms in that, I did understand it. Now, we were doing some of the largest transactions that were around at that time, and I recognized that the companies who were doing them were going to really struggle in managing the relationship. And I theorized that what they really needed was a software tool to help them manage the relationship. Yeah. So I'd identified a potential niche, and I'd taken it to E&Y, and I'd said, "Look, guys, I think we should do this. It's needed." And E&Y said, "Look, we're not a software company. We don't want to do it." So I said, "Well, that's great, but I do, so I resign." Yeah. And so I did. And so that was how we got into that space.
Okay. So kind of got into, this outsourcing, which, I can see where this was like kind of the beginning of all that, creating this software, which worked because you didn't fall on your face. You didn't go bankrupt. So it worked.
To be honest, it took years to develop. To fund it, we started consulting.
Okay, so I see. So you were using the consulting basically to generate income to be able to pay for the development. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. And turns out, I was one of the real experts in the time, and was able to generate sort of $500,000 personally in billings a year.
Okay, that's significant.
Back in '91, it was more significant.
Absolutely, yeah.
And because I and so I did have a non-compete with E&Y. The non-compete was I just couldn't call on the clients I've been serving. But anyway, that grew, and then I was faced with the issue: do I expand the consulting, right? And I think one of these pivot points we talked about. Look, I kind of recognized at the time I could make $500,000 a year. If I didn't have the software or other people, I could keep $500,000 a year.
Right.
Right. but do I then want to redeploy that money I'm making back into software engineers and consultants? And so I started hiring a couple of consultants. And at that time, actually, a couple of them, I was fortunate in the first couple of people we hired, and they were pretty good. But they were largely doing what I told them to do, right? So we would go on a project, and I would organize it, and they would do it. So and I hired a really good guy called Ray Frenzel who I'd known at EDS, and he helped grow it. So we grew the consulting practice, and because it was novel and new was a niche. For example, we got an opportunity in London, and then we got an opportunity, and so we started growing the London operation, all of the UK operations, and so it kind of, our reputation grew, and we were introduced to a lot of different places. So that grew, and eventually we did get the software to a point where we about a couple of $1 million of revenue a year. It was about break even. Mm-hmm. But what we were finding was that the software, the consultants really didn't. The idea was that we would do consulting, we'd help them set up an outsourcing transaction, and then they buy the software to help manage it. Well, the software, it's one of those things that sounds reasonable.
It does,
just doesn't work very well. It turns out consultants really don't feel like they should be selling consulting. I mean,
selling software, they should be selling their expertise.
Yeah, they want to just sell more, and they were skeptical as to whether the way to solve the problem was with software. They would think it would be more consulting.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Because they wanted to continue on with the engagement.
Anyway, that became pretty frustrating, and eventually we just shut software down because we had this fast-growing consulting practice.
Okay.
So
you pretty much educated the world on outsourcing.
Well, there was another firm that turned out to get started just a little ahead of us called TPI, and the two of us they did a better job of focusing consulting early. We were splitting our time, and so they grew their consulting much faster than us. But for a while, it was the two of us contesting in the marketplace for who. And one of the things I recognized was that we were becoming a sort of a cheaper, faster version of TPI. And that didn't sit well with me. So I went and pivoted the consulting practice. I recruited actually a guy called Eric Simonson, who's still with us, from McKinsey. He'd just recently left McKinsey. And we said, look, the thesis was we could build a boutique strategy firm. There's kind of two ways to do the work at the time. One was sort of procedural through a methodology, and the other one was through trying to really understand and understand the strategy, really shape the transaction around what you really needed. And the thesis, so we carved out this sort of boutique strategy firm. We pivoted the nature of the consulting from methodology-based, rote methodology and it required us to completely rethink the talent model. So
it's a lot harder to do it that way.
Well, what's hard is if you have a team that's doing it one way and then recognizing you want to do it a different way and then having to change that team out while you keep the bus going. So that was a very fundamental pivot. And that took us through, and we did other things along the way. We launched a media company. Actually, we bought a magazine and turned it into a media company. And we grew that to about $1.5 million. Eventually we sold that.
And that was still focused within this very specific niche that you were in.
I mean, outsourcing, it started with outsourcing, broadened to other things like systems integration, large systems integration contracts. So the consulting focus was on how to buy it and manage it, right? And then in 2004, back after the internet boom, the Y2K, right?
Yeah.
And I reckon, and labor arbitrage was coming on the scenes. We first worked on labor arbitrage really in the 90s.
What is that?
Labor arbitrage is where rather than the old EDS IBM model was around data centers and leverage through equipment. Labor arbitrage is leveraging our the arbitrage on labor. So people are cheaper in India than they are in the US.
Oh, I see. So
you
the
take the
difference,
work to India,
Oh, I got you.
and that actually really dramatically changed the whole services industry. And we were at the forefront of unpacking that. And then by '03, I could see that that was a very simple model, and it didn't require the first of all, people were learning to buy out these services on their own. They didn't need a specialist firm. So in-house was starting to take over. The big four were kind of taking over the space. And so this area is going to mature. And so we need something else. So we looked at, we were buying research from Gartner and others, but it was not very good research. It wasn't fact-based. It was kind of more opinion-based. And so being the firm we are, we started to develop our own fact base. And so we had our own research, and then we said, well, if we're building this, we might as well sell the research. So we launched research in '04 around that thesis.
And research is different than the consulting. How? What's the distinction between those two models?
In general, the way I describe it is, it's a completely different category. But consultants seek to tell you what to do and help you do it.
Okay.
And our form of research is to tell you what you need to know and help you explain it.
I got it. Okay.
So
very different.
It's they're related. Many consulting firms will do small amounts of research, and it's mostly designed as bait to attract clients. But it's of a different quality, and it's not persistent. It doesn't keep evolving. All right, it's look, here's why you should put in SAP, or here's why you should transform this function. Ours is it's more about with you on the journey. How do you keep supporting the people as they move forward?
And this is customized too, right? So y'all are working with some of the largest, my understanding, some of the largest companies in the world on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you're providing like a pretty customized research to what they want. Is that correct?
Sort of.
Okay.
Our research. So research. We have a research line. It might cover, say, cloud computing.
Okay.
Right, or finance and accounting, or some area, AI, and data science, or an area, and we have, I think, 83 different areas we cover right now.
83?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot.
Yes.
So we compete with companies called Gartner, Forrester, IDC, and a host of smaller firms.
Okay.
And the traditional model is you subscribe to the line, so they're investigating that area, right? And that who we compete against on the research side is effectively you buy access to a library, and you can read the library and then ask questions about what's in the library. That's
so it's the same model that like in the investment world has been around for a very long time. As far as like in my world where you have research that you subscribe to and so forth.
Yeah, I think it's that's another area of research.
Sure.
How we differentiate is we do that, but effectively what they're doing there is their analysts are spent time publishing, and they limit access to the analysts. So our model, we invert the model. So what we're trying to do is apply the research to the things that our clients are wrestling with. We call it critical issues at moments that matter. So
it's not necessarily customized, but it's very targeted, maybe.
It's in context. It's applying the research. So our particular research combines research, the facts, with problem solving. How do you apply it to your situation? So what is the implication of that? It would be similar to what you're doing. You're taking that research and then helping an individual say, well, how do I take advantage of those trends, or how do I manage my wealth within the context of what's happening in the market?
Gotcha.
So it would be similar to that. Doing that at scale in these technical areas is different. At least it's mostly different. There are smaller firms that can do it. We seem to have, we've created a structure where we can do it at scale, which is what others struggle to do.
So at scale, meaning that, through this subscription process, I guess, correct?
Well, scale means number of people, number of clients,
Mm-hmm.
amount of revenue.
Yeah.
The fundamentally the traditional model, which is very successful and creates a lot of value, is what we call a rock star analyst model. You try to get your analysts to become really well-known rock stars, so people will read their stuff, and then you make, with 3 weeks notice, they'll let you talk to them for 45 minutes.
Okay. Gotcha.
On a topic, and maybe them or someone else. So that's the model. So you're constraining the access to the analyst, and you're selling as many people as possible to read the library. Okay.
Gotcha.
We have what we call an all-star team. Our model is, yes, you should subscribe. It's a membership plus project, but likely we're trying to maximize engagement. So our team structure allows a lot of conversations where we can understand what you're wrestling with and then apply what we know. Typically, that then creates need for more investigation, which is a project. Okay.
Gotcha.
So it creates a sort of flywheel. So our research is more practical. Okay, still leading edge, but more practical and applied to the set of things that you are wrestling with or should be wrestling.
Should be wrestling this, and it continues.
And
you're able to continue to engage and continue to evolve.
So that's the niche we've evolved into.
Wow, Peter. Okay, so this is really technical stuff. All right.
Yeah,
and so and it makes sense because you're very much a very technical, very intelligent person who's been in this space for a really long time. So, normally I would say that, when you have a founder who, is extremely technical and smart and is using their expertise from a service standpoint to be able to build a company, you're gonna hit some ceilings. And yet you've kind of broken through. How did you do that?
Well, there's never one thing, right? I mean, this reminds me of a humor story. So I was lecturing at Wharton, and at the end you take questions, and it was on entrepreneurialism and company, and someone asked me, one of the students, MBA students, said, "Look, what's the key to running a company?" Which is similar to what you asked. And I said, "Well, there's many things, but if I could leave you one idea, is hire smarter people than you and make sure they hire smarter people than them." And then one of the guys, another student, raised his hand and said, "Do you do that?" I said, "Yeah, I think I do. That's what we try to do." He says, "Well, you know what that makes you?" And I said, "No." He says, "The dumbest guy in the company." I said, "That would be the jaws. That would be the trick." So I tell that story, but because it's humorous, but there's a little bit of a trick to that. So you really want to find really, really good people.
Yeah.
Right. And fortunately for me, that I'm not that bright, so it's easier to find people brighter than me, but it's hard to get them to hire people brighter than them. So how do you break through? I mean, so there's one thing is you have to have a mindset you want to do it. We were talking earlier, known lots and lots of founders over the years. Many of them, one of the things I advise is, look, you get to a certain size and you can grow that because of your own expertise, willpower, energy, sales skills, probably all of the above.
Yeah.
So you get to a certain size, that may be 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, some number, depending on the industry you're in and what you're doing. Then you're faced with a choice. The fewer employees you own, the more you get to keep.
Right.
Okay? And you're creating most of the value in the firm. Right. And so,
which that was you for a good while, I would think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Then do I hire people? Well, the metaphor I always had hiring people is like baby chicks, right? In a nest. They just screaming for mom to bring in worms, right? I mean, and so you spend your time just bringing the chicks, feeding everybody else. And what you find is your income, what you're keeping, what's left over, dramatically falls. And there's no way around that, right? Now, so the question is your first is, do I really want to do that? Do I just want to keep the money, right? And I've always argued that most people, if they kept it small, would end up 5-10 years from now more in the bank than if they try to grow a medium-sized.
Well, it's more in the bank, but there's less in potentially the value of the business.
Yeah, but how valuable is that business? It's small.
I agree with you. I think that I think that's true. I think that there are two paths there, and you can end up pretty close to the same place either way sometimes.
Well, with a lot less heartache,
it could be,
and a lot less risk. So that's one of the choices you do. So you want to be self-aware, which I said, you have to be brutally cynical and relentlessly optimistic. One of them is, do I want to do this? Let's say, like I did, you want to do it, right? Then it's a combination of many things. First of all, will your value proposition with what you're doing allow you to scale, right? I mean, is it something that will scale or will grow? Is it better than what you're competing against? In what dimensions is it better? Are you winning a high proportion of what you're going after or a low proportion of what you're going after, right? As one of the acid tests. So one of the things is, do you have a value proposition that will scale, right? And I've seen a lot of people take value propositions that won't scale, waste a lot of money trying to get.
Happens all the time. Yeah.
Let's assume that you have a value proposition that will scale. And by the way, you have a feeling. You don't
know for sure.
You don't know. Well, for sure is a high level of confidence. But how much conviction do you have about that? Do you want to do it? Let's say you think you have something and you want to do it, right? You get to this point where the first issue is just hiring more people, right? And then being willing to take the risk that I've got to feed the richer people, wonderful people, but they still require a paycheck every month, and you have to pay them whether you made the money or not, right? I can remember when we started out, my goal was to sell 20,000 a month of work, right? And then we built enough people where it had to sell 50,000 a month.
Yeah.
I remember the month we sold 1 million. I was like, oh my goodness, I've arrived, right?
Yeah.
But so you have these targets in your head of which how much you have to bring in to support the cost base. So anyway, you get to this point where first, are you going to try and scale it? And then I think every entrepreneur, me included, gets to a point where you say, look, I can only take this firm so far. I can only take it at 5 million or 10 million. I personally can't go sell another 10 million. Okay.
Right.
And it could be selling, it could be production, there are these constraints there. As an entrepreneur, you're pretty much doing everything. You're managing everything. And you get to a level where you simply can't do more, right? And by doing more, you're doing less quality and it's hurting you, right? And that's hard to recognize, but there's a point. And many entrepreneurs, I think, hit that stage. Then the question is, well, do I want to keep going, right? And most of us well, why not? Well, here's why not, because you're going to have to change.
Yes.
You're going to have to change, and you're going to the person you became to be able to manage it at, let's just say, for nice round numbers, 10 million, isn't going to be the person who can take it to 20. So, do you sell it? Silicon Valley says founders shouldn't be allowed to keep going; they should be replaced, which I think is just bullshit. I mean, though some of them. So the question is then, let's say you have decided, I'm going to grow it. I'm going to double it. I'm going to triple it. I'm going to 10x it, right? Okay. You have to recognize that the person you have become, and in my case, it was the person I had become, not the person I started with. I was an accomplished executive on a fast track, first at EDS, then at EY. I knew how to operate in organizations. I knew how to run meetings. I knew how to delegate. I had been trained how to do that. I had relearned a whole bunch of skills in becoming an entrepreneur, right? And I had become someone else. And there was really no way back. I couldn't unlearn what I'd learned.
Mm-hmm.
It was deeply ingrained.
But you still had to change, though.
But I had to change. So you have to say, well, how am I going to change? And to recognize that what you're doing and who you are, if you can't evolve it, will constrain the organization moving forward, and likely it will fail.
So you recognize this, and at the same time made a decision.
Well, I think all of us recognize it to some degree. I mean, we're all enough self-aware, and if you don't, you just may keep trying, but you're just going to waste a ton of money and potentially
so being self-aware in this situation, what kind of drove you to decide that you were going to take it to the next level? You were going to go through the difficulty and the hardship of trying to change and the risk and so forth.
I mean, like entrepreneur, you just self-confidence and why not, right?
Okay.
And again, I said this before. I'm not that particularly money-oriented. It's like, well, it's a good challenge. Let's see if we can do it, right? And it was painful, and it was not only painful for me, but for the organization. And for me, the way I went about it is being really good people in. We brought a guy called Todd Furness in, and he really helped change the organization. Then other people. Then we brought other people in. He wasn't the founder, and he didn't have the same vision I had. Eventually, he had to leave, and did very well in leaving. That's fine. Really appreciative of what he did for the firm and what he did. But he helped me and helped the organization evolve, right? And then we brought other people in who did that, right? But point I want to make is it's not just about you changing. We had to also evolve the value proposition. During that time period where we were growing very fast as a consulting firm, the 08 happened, and our consulting practice never got back to that same.
I think most didn't. Yeah.
Well, no, when we sold it, it never got back there.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it not only did consulting go away for a time, but the space we were in fundamentally changed, where it was less attractive, more mature, low price. So it had the complexity of having to reinvent the company while we were also having to make these changes to, for myself, techniques and who I am and how I was living, as well as the organization. That was really, really painful. I said, very stressful, very painful. I think the stressful part was that we were shrinking as a company. I just hate layoffs. It's soul destroying. I get it's soul destroying for the people you're laying off, but it's soul destroying for the people doing it too.
Absolutely.
I just really try to avoid them. Now, we'll let people go for performance issues. Don't have a problem with that. But layoffs because we've failed as a company, and shrinking is failing as a company, really hard, painful. Anyway, so you have to evolve, and the firm has to evolve, and then likely the value proposition, the business model. No business model is static. At least very few are. Yours may be, but
not really.
Fundamentally, it keeps evolving. You have to keep pushing the firm to evolve. And in doing that, and there are some people that will go with you on that journey, and some people who won't, right?
Yeah.
And likely, eventually, those that won't will have to leave. Some of them will leave of their own volition. Some of them maybe have to ask to leave.
So what I keep hearing over and over is just change. You've changed,
the company changes, you
change, your employees change,
the techniques you use, the managing approaches you change, uses. It never stops. We're a multinational company. We're rolling out a new. We just went through a big reorganization, putting in NetSuites rather than Intact. Again, I personally don't think that was necessary, but our accounting team did. So eventually they persuaded me or persuaded us that it was a good idea.
I think it's just a part of growing, having to change your systems.
Change for change's sake is not good, but change against the direction. So you're constantly having to, as a founder, you're constantly having to, no one else is going to push the firm forward like you do. No one else cares or has that authority to do it. They're going to bitch and moan when they do it, but if you don't do it, they're going to really suffer, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to go out of business.
Yeah. So you said earlier that you haven't been hugely motivated by money through this process, which you said it in a way that sounded like you felt like you were kind of unique within the entrepreneurial space, which I will tell you that you're not.
No,
I really do believe. I think most of the entrepreneurs that I talk with are surprisingly not hugely money motivated.
No, I don't think I'm unique. I think most people looking at a founder or an entrepreneur think that's why they did it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And what I find amusing is I know numerous people who did it for those reasons and failed.
Yeah, okay. That's true too.
I like, guys, there's much simpler ways to make money than to start a company.
Simpler, less stressful, less risk, less.
And they're not, those people aren't committed to making it work, right? What you have to do to make it work, it's relentless.
It's about more than the money. I wonder what it really is. I think that the real reward from entrepreneurism, I guess you could say, is not money, but maybe time, maybe freedom, things like that.
Lots of things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
If you're successful, you will likely make very much. You'll have a high standard of living.
You'll make money, but
you'll have a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
In both the company and the people you help develop.
You get to grow as a person.
You see your ideas working, or at least being shaped. And I think there's a lot of satisfaction in all of those things. For those of us who are doing it, my advice to people is don't do it unless it's burning to get out. But if it is, then you should go do it.
Yeah.
And I've had several people who I've seen that it's burning to get out. They're now successful entrepreneurs. Some of them compete against us. My view is they should be running their own company.
Yeah.
They can be successful for a time, but they're going to be a real pain in the ass to anyone they work for.
Yeah. So I'm always intrigued by how entrepreneurs are motivated and how they decide that this is what they want to do, and seem to the successful ones really enjoy so many other aspects besides the money. It gets to the point where it's just tons of fun, right? There's the stress and all that, but then at the other end, it's the teamwork, it's the winning. I hear that a lot, and then we get to a point where we're trying to figure out how to cycle and change yet again, and not necessarily taking it to the next iteration, but where as a founder, you're starting to try to figure out how to make your company survive almost completely without you because of our mortality.
Yeah, that's true. I'm 64.
Yeah.
So we've just been through a big reorg. Was
a lot of it had to do with kind of what you were trying to do to make sure that your company could continue?
In life, there's normally multiple motivations, and there were multiple motivations. It was time for the organization to change.
Mm-hmm.
We needed a new org structure. It was also time in my life to have the next generation take a much more active role. I don't want to leave the firm. Not going to leave the firm. Well, eventually we'll all leave. Hopefully not feet first, but part of that was one of the goals, but not the only goal. So I'm sort of sitting here going, okay, it's time to have the next generation take it forward. And by next generation, it's not my kids. They don't want to do it.
Sure, it's just G2 in the organization.
I think in doing that, you've got to make a decision. Look, do we have a permanent niche? Does this thing have a chance, or should we put it with a strategic or some other firm? Should we sell it?
Right.
Now, we're at the size where it's a highly valuable firm, and we could do that. And I just have to answer the phone if I have some idiot trying to buy it. So, or not idiot, but someone trying to buy it.
Yeah.
A lot of people trying to buy it. We're not interested in that. But you have to decide, well, what do you want for the firm? What do you want for yourself? Right. And part of it is, does this thing have a chance? If so, how do I give it the best chance?
Well, it sounds like you believe it does, so that
Well, in my situation, yeah, I think we've got a disruptive, highly differentiated, likely slightly disruptive model that can continue to take share. It clearly makes a difference in its customers in a way that others struggle to make a difference. So, yeah, it's a defensible position. We have fortunate enough we've worked hard to have a team that's, well, we'll see. There's going to be two phases, right? There'll be, can they operate it with me as executive chairman and some help? And then eventually, can they operate it without that?
Correct. Yeah.
And we'll see. And then there's the whole ownership issues, but we'll have to, our view is I think we effectively, if you can't go public, you're going to have to sell it, right? Well, you can have a family-run business, but my family probably don't want to run it. So our goal is, can we get it big enough where it at least has a chance to go public?
Oh, nice. So just do an IPO on it.
Well, that would create a sustainable path forward.
Yeah, I can see that.
You could go private equity, but that's just an interim step to selling to a strategic or going public.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So you just skip that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you got to get it, again, you got to get the value proposition, the organization in place going forward. We'll see what happens in 5-10 years' time.
Well, that's exciting, Peter.
Yeah.
It's really exciting.
Hopefully I can go from 80 hours a day to 20.
80 hours a week?
80 hours a week, rather. Yeah, not a day. Yeah, a week. And I'm already.
Yeah, you're
already moved it down substantially, and we're fortunate enough to have a really talented team.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, just congratulations on all your success with being able to take this company to a level that potentially or probably will become public.
I don't know if it'll become public, but that's we've got to get it to the size and scale and growth where it has that potential. Because if we can do that, then whatever ownership structure we put it into, it can continue on.
Yeah,
we won't lose. It won't lose the culture and the hundreds and hundreds of people in the firm now who've chosen to build their careers around it can continue.
Yeah, makes sense to me. That's exciting. Well, yeah, I think we can wrap up. That was a great walk through kind of your growth as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as a company. If somebody wants to get in contact with you and maybe ask further questions and things like that,
it's really, if you can spell my name, you got my email. Peter@Bendor-Samuel.com.
Okay. Does the Bendor-Samuel have a hyphen in between?
It doesn't matter. We own both.
Okay, perfect.
Both of them. So,
okay.
But yeah, if you can spell my name, you can get it.
Okay. Well, we'll put it in the show notes as well. Hopefully we'll spell it right.
Right.
And
it's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible you won't.
Yeah. Never know. So folks, if you have questions for
look
Peter,
up LinkedIn.
Or LinkedIn. Yeah.
I mean,
this will be up on LinkedIn.
Look for a name that's a foot long.
So if you're interested in talking to Peter further, we appreciate you providing a lot of really good information today for us and helping us all grow and always have something there in front of us that we're trying to get to. And I think certainly, the entrepreneurial journey has so much more to do about it than just, hey, can we make the most money we possibly can? It's about finding a way to develop something that never existed before. I really think that's what's all about.
You got to find a niche. You got to find something that you do other people want.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's a few things.
Yeah, I mean, in at least my experience is that kept evolving, both what we did and how we did it.
Yeah.
Kept. I mean, I think the term in Silicon Valley, you keep pivoting.
Right.
Now, as you get bigger, I mean, my experience is early on, you're throwing a lot of mud at the wall. You're trying to figure out what works, and you're changing rapidly. As you finally get to a value prop or something that really does work, um, then you need to stop doing that. It's one of the changes you need to make, which is at some point you've got something that's working and clearly can scale. Then you need to really cut back on the iterations of the new ideas because it just drives the existing organization nuts. The tension in that is most organizations don't reckon, or people don't recognize they need to keep evolving. So you have to keep pushing them to evolve, but the number or things of new ideas, either you need to do it in a separate organization, or which is hard to do because you've got to spend time with people.
Yeah.
So that's one of the changes, which is you just have to slow down. I wouldn't call it the innovation. You can innovate around your existing ideas, make them better, right? It's the brand new idea that, that is so disruptive to the organization.
Yeah. No, I do hear that a lot. That's a really difficult
and I think that's what
tightrope.
I think we had to really evolve through that. It drove people nuts. It drove me nuts to be told, no, look, let's stay focused.
That's tough.
And sometimes we did, and sometimes we didn't.
I bet so. Well, thanks everybody for being here today with us. I want to remind you that we put this out every other week. We're always looking for new victims like Peter, folks that will come onto the show and talk to us about their challenges and their success and help us all become better. So if you know anybody like that, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Again, we appreciate you. Have a great week. Take care.
Bye.